Few foods are quite as comforting as homemade meatballs, but of course making them can be messy business. So today I've teamed up with Delta Faucets to bring you meatballs 3 delicious ways, with the help of my brand new Touch 2.0 kitchen faucet. I am absolutely in love with this faucet, and trust me, in a second, you're gonna see why. Today I'm going to show you my yummy classic meatballs, some feta stuffed turkey meatballs, and finally, some mushroom meatballs that are actually completely vegan. I absolutely love meatballs because they're rich and they're filling, and they can be made ahead of time for extra convenience. Any of these recipes can be doubled or tripled and then frozen for an easy weeknight supper. Now let's get started with my yummy classic meatballs. For these tasty meatballs, I'm actually using a combination of ground beef and ground pork, but you could also do these with just ground beef if that's what you had on hand, no problem at all. To get started, I'm going to soak some breadcrumbs in some milk. This is going to add a whole lot of moisture to our final meatball. So all I'm going to do is pour my milk over my breadcrumbs, give them a stir, and then set this aside while I get to work on flavoring my meat. To do that today, I'm using some minced garlic, a little Italian seasoning, then I've got some fresh parsley, some freshly grated Parmesan, and some salt and pepper. Next, it's time to bind all of this yumminess together. I'm going to do that with 1 egg and my breadcrumb mixture. Next, we're going to mix this all up, and there's really only one way to do this, and that's with these. So it's just a matter of getting in there and getting your hands dirty. I'm going to mix all this up until it's really well combined, and then I'm going to form my meatballs. I like my meatballs on the larger side, but you could absolutely do mini meatballs if you wanted to, no problem at all. Now that our meatballs are formed, it is time for a badly needed hand wash. Remember that fancy faucet I was telling you about? Well, my favorite part about it is that it actually turns on with a simple touch, so there's no need to spread this mess around. Another cool feature is that this LED light actually shows you what the water temperature is. How cool is that? And last but not least, I actually think it looks pretty good too. Now, there are 2 different methods for cooking your meatballs. The first is to fry them in a frying pan and then to add your sauce. The second is to bake them. I, myself, am a fan of baking. All right, it is time to get these beautiful meatballs into the oven. I'm gonna be baking them at 375 for between 30 and 40 minutes, or until they're nicely browned. Then I'm simply going to top them with a little bit of pasta sauce and put them back in the oven for another 10 to 15 minutes. Once they're ready, you can eat them as is, or serve them over a bed of spaghetti topped with some freshly grated Parmesan and some freshly chopped parsley. What could be more delicious than that? Next up, I'm excited to show you my feta stuffed turkey meatballs. What I love about these meatballs is that they each have a little feta surprise in the center. I'm getting started once again by soaking my breadcrumbs in some milk. All I'm going to do is pour my milk over and give it a good stir. Then it's time to add a whole lot of flavor to my ground turkey. Now, ground turkey itself is actually quite bland, so it's gonna need a little extra love. And today, that love is coming in the form of some shredded red onion, a little bit of minced garlic, some finely chopped roasted red peppers, some finely chopped flat leaf parsley, some Greek seasoning, some salt, some pepper, the zest of 1 lemon, and that should do the trick. Next, for our binders, we are going to add 1 egg and our breadcrumb mixture. And then it's just a matter of mixing this all up. And once again, the only real way to do this is with your hands. Now that our turkey mixture is well combined, it's time to start forming our meatballs. For this, I'm going to be using a little bit of cubed feta in the center of each meatball. So all I'm going to do is create a little patty in the palm of my hand and then press the cube of feta into the center and wrap the meat mixture around it. I'm simply going to lay these meatballs out on a well-greased baking sheet, and into the oven they go at 375 for between 30 and 40 minutes, or until they're cooked through. Once they're ready, I like to serve them with a beautiful Greek salad and some homemade tzatziki. For that recipe, all you need to do is click this thumbnail or find the link in the description box below. Finally, I'm going to show you my vegan mushroom meatballs. These are so super yummy, you won't even miss the meat, I swear it. For this recipe, we are going to be blending up most of our ingredients in the food processor. You could theoretically do this by hand, but honestly, you'd have to chop everything so fine. I really recommend doing it with your food processor. It'll save you a ton of time. So to our food processor, we are going to add some pecans, some yellow onion, some celery, and some carrot. As you can see, I've roughly chopped everything because really the food processor is going to do all the work. To that, I'm going to add some minced garlic and then I'm going to pulse this all up until it becomes fine crumbs. Next, I'm going to remove my lid and add in my cremini mushrooms. You could also do this with white button mushrooms, but cremini mushrooms just happen to be my very favorite, so that's what I'm using. I'm also going to add a splash of olive oil. Then I'm going to put my lid back on and blend this all up until it resembles coarse crumbs. You may need to scrape down your food processor a couple times to make sure everything gets well incorporated. Then we're just going to pour all of this yumminess into a large mixing bowl and get to work on our binder. In this recipe, because we're not using any egg, we're actually going to be using something I like to call a flax egg. It behaves very similarly to an egg, but it's completely vegan. So I've got 1 tablespoon of ground flax seeds in a bowl, and to that I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of water. I'm going to stir all this together and set it aside for a few minutes while I keep working on my mushroom mixture. So to my mushroom mixture, I'm going to add some fresh thyme, a little bit of Italian seasoning, and some salt and some pepper. Next, I'm going to be adding some tamari sauce. You could also use some vegan Worcestershire sauce instead. This adds a really nice savory, meaty flavor to our final dish. I'm going to finish this all off with some rolled oats instead of breadcrumbs and my flax egg. Then I'm just going to mix this all together with my hands and roll it into meatballs. I've got a well-greased baking dish standing by and I'm just going to place my meatballs on my baking dish and into the oven they go at 375 for about 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, I'm going to remove my meatballs from the oven and pour on some delicious tomato sauce. In this case, I'm actually using a nice spicy arrabbiata sauce because I think it adds a ton of flavor. I'm going to pop this back into the oven for another 10 minutes or so, and when they're finished, these meatballs are loaded with flavor and ready to eat. I like to serve them on some roasted spaghetti squash. If you've never roasted a spaghetti squash, not to worry, I'll show you that in an upcoming episode. I hope you'll give these tasty recipes a try, and if you do, be sure to tweet or Instagram me a photo because you know I love seeing what you're coming up with in your very own kitchens. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to The Domestic Geek because there's lots more deliciousness where this came from.